Spoilers for up to Season 4, Episode 9 of Only Murders in the Building. If you haven't seen all the latest episodes, pause this video, bring out a Ouija board and some peasant drink to a comatose patient, and then come back and watch. Did Marshall pull a Jan? I mentioned on last week's video podcast in Season 1, when she should have been quiet and let everyone assume the Demas killed Tim Kono, Jan was spreading doubt. In Season 2, when not one person suspected Poppy in Bunny's murder, rather than staying quiet, Poppy told Mabel the truth that she was the missing Becky Butler. This season, the podcast trio assumed one person shot Sazz, then cleaned up the apartment and dumped Sazz in the incinerator. Marshall, who should simply stay quiet, points out that there's a problem with the podcast trio's timeline. There had to be two people involved. Why in the world would evil Marshall point out that the timeline was wrong? Who are the two people? We know one is Marshall, but is there an accomplice? Or could Marshall have accomplished this all on his own? How did Marshall gain access to the Dudenoff apartment? How did Marshall even know about the Dudenoff apartment? We're going to focus on that question, the end of podcast note writer, possible hints towards Season 5, and more on this week's episode of Let's Solve Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 9, Escape from Planet Klongo. We'll be breaking down each episode for clues, suspects, and red herrings on the hunt to learn, did Marshall have an accomplice? Use the timestamps below to jump to the topic or suspect you want to hear, and skip past stuff you do not want to listen to. There's going to be a spoiler section at the end of the podcast. They're really not big spoilers at this point, because there's only one episode left. But just to be safe, after your feedback, we're going to have some spoilers. We got this feedback from Gabriel, who said, I think Season 2 was the best. Season 3 was funny, and I loved the songs, but something was missing on that season. In Gabriel's honor, how do you rank the seasons? Go down in the comments and let's hear it. Which is your favorite of the 4 seasons of Only Murders in the Building? Go down, let's hear your reasons why. Gabriel likes Season 2, what do you like the best? We always look at the Double C credit clues for Double E's Easter eggs. Gravy and Sevelin are back in the credits. We miss you already, Hammy Faye Baker. Plus, there's that giant green screen at the top. In the closing credits, there's a copy of the script written by Marshall P. Pope, as well as a dry cleaning truck, and we are going to talk about that. The film title this week is Escape from Planet Klongo. If you search Escape from Planet Klongo on IMDb, you get a bunch of films that aren't Escape from Planet Klongo. You get Escape from Pleasure Planet from 2016. You get Escape from Planet Earth from 2012. And of course, Escape from the Planet of the Apes in 1971. I got this feedback from George, who wrote, I'm doing a marathon for all the movies they mention in the names of the episodes. Well, George, tell me, have you found Escape from Planet Klongo? Let's hear it. With only one episode left in Only Murders in the Building Season 4, let me tell you what's coming up here at Double PHQ. In November of 2024, we're going to go back into the silo for Season 2 of the Apple TV show Silo with our after show podcast. Silo is not a whodunit murder mystery, so we won't be doing a fun Let's Solve format for Silo. Yet Silo actually does have a lot of mysteries about the situation that the lead character finds herself in. And there are clues on Silo that can help you solve or discover what's going on before they reveal what's going on. If you watch Silo, please join us on our after show podcast. Let me say, looking forward into the calendar 2025, we're going to be covering Star Wars Andor Season 2, the new Game of Thrones show, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. We're going to be doing our third covering of the anthology series The Terror, The Devil in Silver. And of course, we'll be doing Only Murders in the Building Season 5. But that said, I currently don't have another show to do one of these Let's Solve video podcast series on. Pitch me a show that's coming up. Go down on the comments, reach out on social media at DoublePHQ. If you know of a good murder mystery coming up, maybe not one on Netflix where they drop all the episodes at once, but somewhere where we could talk about it week to week, please give me some ideas. I don't want to have to wait till Season 5 to get all the Clue crew back together. If you've been watching these Only Murders in the Building video podcasts since Season 1, thank you so much for being a part of the Clue crew on this crazy journey. If you've joined along the way, thank you very much. We need every internet detective. If you haven't subscribed yet, we're about 1,300 subscribers away from 10,000. Now is the time. You can do it. You know you want to do it. You know you're sick of me asking you to do it. Please, it doesn't cost you anything. Just click subscribe on YouTube. Let's get to 10,000 as we catch Sazz's shooter. Before we run down the possible accomplices, let's see what episode 9 taught us about the victim, actor stunt double Sazz Pataki. 2 years ago in Los Angeles, someone asked Sazz to create a stunt team for Project Ronkonkoma. Sazz wasn't looking, backed up her car, and knocked somebody up in the air. Pages flew out. That person was Rex Bailey. Sazz, who always wanted to train people, like her father trained stunt people. She trained Rex. But in a terrible twist of fate, Rex stole her script and caused her death. Now let's look at Marshall P. Pope and see if there are any clues about his evilness that could lead us to the accomplice, if there was one. Marshall is Rex Bailey. Rex trained under Sazz for quite a while, ended up with many injuries, including losing a heel in a stunt on one of the Jackass films. With a busted heel, could Marshall move around quickly enough to do all this crime by himself? Has anybody noticed Marshall walking with a limp because of this missing heel? As Marshall was training for a stunt with fire, he put on a flame-resistant vest. Is this the tinsel? Why would he wear it to the assassination of Sazz? A couple of weeks ago, when a lot of people were pointing out all the clues about Marshall, let me eat some crow, I said, boy, this sounds like a perfect theory, except the show has never displayed or hinted that Sazz wanted to write a script. And the show still hasn't presented that, even though we know Sazz did write a script. I wish they had done some sort of hint about this. I mean, they said Sazz wanted to open a stunt school, never that she wanted to write a script, but there were plenty of clues, and I did mention it, about how the script was kind in its description of Charles, and how that could be a sign that Sazz wrote it. Many of you saw the scene of Glen possibly recognizing Marshall as a clue, and boy was it. That was a flashing red neon light. Marshall did it. Did you put the finger on Marshall, or do you have a finger on one of his accomplices? Let's go down in the comments and work this out. Marshall could have followed the sister brothers to the Dudenoff apartment. I'm not sure how he would have learned how to gain access to it. Maybe he just learned that from the sister brothers too. But how did Marshall find out about the Dudenoff apartment? Now let's look at the suspects for who would make a good accomplice. Jan Bellows. Jan is still out there. Sazz was breaking up with Jan. Would Jan find somebody to help take the vengeance? It doesn't seem likely, but I suppose it's possible. Any chance that you think Jan is our accomplice? Stuntman Glen. Glen was the new stuntman to replace Marshall on Project Ronkonkoma. In the funeral to Sazz, Glen really speaks poorly of Rex. So that's one strike about being the accomplice. Also, Sazz was Glen's emergency number. So that's another reason why Glen probably wasn't Rex's accomplice. Were you heartbroken that Paul Rudd died a third time? Or did you laugh and say, this guy can't catch a break? Were you sad to see Glen be murdered? The bartender at Concussions. This guy is big. He could move Sazz's body probably quite easily. He is also the one that brought out all the beer bottles, which are supposed to be fake beer bottles, that included a real beer bottle that smashed into Charles's forehead at the service for Sazz in Concussion's bar. He also told the podcast trio that the only people who know what happened are Glen, Sazz, and Ron Howard. I guess that's kind of true, but there was a whole film crew there when it happened with Rex, aka Marshall. So I kind of think a lot of people would have known. What do you think? Is the bartender our accomplice? The Westies. Now, we don't really have any connection between the Westies and Marshall. But Sazz ended up in the exact same incinerator that Professor Dudenoff ended up on. Did Marshall just know about this himself? Did Marshall know how to start an incinerator on his own? Or would the bartender at Concussions know how to start the Arconia incinerator? Is there a chance that any of the Westies were the accomplice? So I'm going to pause right now and let's take a look at this crazy window theory, which could point as Rudy being the accomplice. In Season 3, Episode 10, the episode where Sazz got shot, there's a shot of the courtyard from a lamppost panning up to the West Tower. In the West Tower, there is a window with a light on. Now, this window is in this kind of green section of the West Tower. Each tower has these, I call it green bay windows. That's where the light is. That green insert is actually not in the Dudenoff apartment. These green bay windows are either in the Sazz family apartment building or it's in Rudy's apartment. If you look at the outside of the apartments, the Sazz family has 3 windows in their apartment, but both the Dudenoff apartment and Vince Fish's apartment seemingly don't have windows in the bedroom or bathroom. And there are only 2 windows that we can see from the living space, so boy, those are cramped. We can't tell if Rudy's apartment or the Sazz family would have access to these green bay windows. What do you think of the window theory? Have you ever heard that before? Go down in the comments. Let's hear your thoughts on a final crazy theory. Dr. Maggie told Charles a lot about Sazz and how she was feeling. Now, she didn't point the finger at Rex Bailey, but all the information she told Charles did help lead to the reveal of Rex Bailey. Could this chiropractor be Rex's partner? Helga. Again, Helga doesn't fit the mold because she told the podcast trio about this former protege who caused Sazz so much trouble. But many villains on this show do things and say things they shouldn't, so do you have any suspicion of Helga? Bev Melon. Again, it doesn't make sense that Bev would be the accomplice if she's pointing out how terrible Marshall's writing is. But there could be a way. She was at Sazz's school with another gun. Any suspicion of Bev Melon? Could the accomplice be Nicky The Neck Cacamillo, the Brooklyn dry cleaner with ties to the Caputo crime family? Now, there's been an earlier hint of dry cleaning. In episode 2, Oliver said,
"Of course, this is the week my dry cleaner bumps up his pricing."
Also, kind of out of the blue, Charles said Sazz was carried off in his missing suit bag, something that a dry cleaner would take. Would Marshall have turned to the mob to help him get rid of Sazz's body? Or do you feel that this is a setup for season 5, and we'll see Nicky The Neck Cacamillo in that season? What do you think? This is out there. The show is taking us to dark, dark organized crime. Some of the best parts of this episode was the relationship with our big 3. Oliver Putnam. Oliver tells one of his crazy stories, and sure enough, Ron is somebody who remembers him and had a close personal experience with him. In 1988, at a Chinese restaurant, Oliver and Ron talked the night away, and Ron maybe exposed his tiny nipples. Oliver wants his bachelor party to have wands, whiskey, A-list celebrities, and someone doing something naughty. Really, I think what Oliver wants is his good friend Charles at his bachelor party. Charles Hayden Savage. Charles is going to be Oliver's best man. Heck yeah. They make a joke based on something in real life. Steve Martin and Martin Short do go and get colonoscopies together. Maybe TMI, but they do. It's something they always joke about. Charles has Oliver as his emergency contact, and yet he's sad about being a third wheel between Oliver and Loretta. What do you think? Will this marriage separate the besties? Mabel Mora. Mabel has no fear calling out Marshall and the script. How is she going to get out of this predicament? Or could she just overpower little Marshall? And in our tinfoil hat theory section, I'm going to actually go to one I got from feedback from Blue-Eyed Wonder. This is almost as big a mystery as who shot Sazz. That is, who wrote the End the Podcast note. And Blue-Eyed Wonder sent me this bit of feedback. Let's talk through it. What do you guys think? The End the Podcast note was at the end of Season 1, Episode 3. And Blue-Eyed Wonder writes, only a few people knew the trio were doing a podcast when the End the Podcast note was written. Detective Williams was one of them. They mentioned in the early episodes that only 4 people were listening. And then, in that episode, they told Sting. So the number of suspects who could have written the note are small. In the Season 1, Episode 6 spotlight on Detective Williams, she holds up an evidence bag. On the bag, she has written her name using the backwards 3 for the letter E in her first name, D. Now I'm going to put up a screenshot of this evidence bag, and I'm going to zoom in, and let me say, this is really hard to see. This is hard to make out if Detective Williams actually wrote a backwards 3 for an E. It kind of looks like it. Note that there's a chance that she actually wrote D-E-T rather than D-E-E, but this is so blurry and messy, it is tough to tell. If you're watching my video, do you think that's a backwards 3 that Detective Williams wrote on this evidence bag? Now, Blue-Eyed Wonder goes a bit further. Detective Williams has DID, dissociative identity disorder. In the old days, people used to call it multiple personality disorder. In that season 1, episode 6, which is a spotlight on Detective Williams, she mentions as a kid she watched the TV show Herman's Head. That show was about a guy who had multiple people in his head telling him what to do. Blue-Eyed Wonder writes, Detective Williams has a bunch of personalities. One of her personalities hates the omitb podcasts. The other personality is helping the trio. Another odd thing in Season 1, Episode 6 is that we find out Tim Kono's toxology report was never sent in. And the phone evidence is kind of on hold. And it's a bit of a plot hole. Did somebody prevent this from being investigated? What Blue-Eyed Wonder supposes is if Detective Williams has DID, is this like her own personality not turning things in, not investigating things? That's his theory. What do you guys think? Do you suspect Detective Williams, who we love, would have poisoned Winnie the dog and left this note? There are almost no good answers to who poisoned Winnie the dog and left the note. We don't want Lester to have done it, or Howard, or Uma, or any of the characters we love. Do you buy the theory that Detective Williams did it? Go down in the comments, let's hear it. This probably will not be solved until Season 5. What do you think? Who wrote that note? And as we move to feedback, a lot of people are thinking ahead to Season 5. Thomas wrote, could they be setting up Loretta to be the next murder victim, given that Oliver plans to marry her in the Arconia? Terry wrote similar feedback, writing, something stuck out to me about when they were talking about the wedding. One of the characters says shotgun wedding. Oh no. Sweet Jess has the same idea. The fact that the wedding is taking place in the Arconia, it has to be where next season's murder is going to happen. Man, so many of you guys are suggesting a Moldavian massacre. Throwback to all my friends whose parents watched the show Dynasty. Yeah, could this be it? Sweet Jess says, perhaps the person who gets killed by the 6th Avenue slasher. Ooh, where's Marv? Jemmer, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, wrote, there's one clue that the trio hasn't talked about that was on Sazz's desk. It's the note where Sazz wrote down a list of numbers, 11, 13, 26 question mark, 14 question mark, 86 question mark. The first 2 numbers were scratched off, and the other 3 had question marks. I feel like this is going to turn out to be a valuable clue, but I have no idea what it's about. Any ideas? Well, I have seen people note that the real-life building that the Arconia is in New York is on 86th Street, so could that be the 86 number? 11, 13, and 14, could those be floors of the Arconia? Does anybody have any great number theories? Battlegirl Deb wrote, could this season really be the one where Howard is the murderer and he's working with Uma? Battlegirl Deb, 2 of my favorite characters. If they are the killer, I demand they stay free for at least one more season of TV. We love Uma, we love Howard. Corey wrote, I've been thinking about the compensation Mabel asked Bev for in episode 1. I think Mabel asked for the Arconia, or she asked that Oliver and Charles would always be taken care of and could always stay in the Arconia. I don't think Mabel asked for money. I think she asked for something more meaningful. Love that, Corey. All right, let's get to our spoiler section now. Last week, I mentioned the promotional material that the marketing team put out to where there's a Rotten Tomatoes page for the Only Murders in the Building, the movie, as if it's been released. And in the review, written by Maxine, it actually wrote that the script was from Sazz Pataki. That's right, before episode 8, I got spoiled and confirmed that Sazz wrote the original script. I only got spoiled about 9 to 10 days early, but still, spoilers are the worst. I'm going to end this with a spoiler I got before the season began. I've mentioned it on the podcast. On our Instagram feed, I do post pictures about our Only Murders in the Building coverage and how it was coming up. And so I do hashtag omitb or Only Murders in the Building on these Instagram posts. And then suddenly, about a week before the season began, there was a post on Instagram that was in my feed that said suggested, and it was a picture of the wedding from episode 10 before the season even began. Instagram was showing me a spoiler of Loretta and Oliver getting married. Oh my gosh, can you believe this? I mentioned this earlier in the season about how a character was coming back, and I was a bit shocked. It was Dickie here. I had no idea that Dickie would be back, that there would be a wedding. I got spoiled. Do you guys like these spoiler sections, or do you want me to keep my big mouth shut? Go down in the comments, let me know. Ooh, We've got 1 week left. Next week, we're going to get some answers. Season 4, Episode 10, My Best Friend's Wedding. The final answers to our season are revealed, but not before the trio faces mortal danger and an Arconia wedding. Talk to you next week.